Listen up, we've got a hot one straight from the oven, the kind of news the Lions Nation needs to hear right now. This isn't your average news report, this is straight talk like we're just hanging out. The game in Green Bay dropped some bombs, some real surprises, and there are details you'll only get here. Want to know what really went down? Before I drop today's bombshells, let me poke you real quick. Did you know that almost 90% of the people who tune in haven't hit that subscribe button yet? That's how you miss out on the real deal Lions News Central analysis, my friend. You can't let that slide. Go ahead, hit that button, stick with us, and show the strength of the Lions Nation. I'm telling you, Dan Campbell's nonchalant attitude toward Micah Parsons before the Green Bay game had a lot of people scratching their heads. You've got a guy who joins the Packers after a whole trade saga, 2 first-round picks involved, plus Kenny Clark getting shipped out, and the feeling is that Dan looked at it and thought, oh nice, they got Clark out of here, that's perfect. And honestly, it makes a certain amount of sense because for almost a decade, Clark had been a wrecker against our offensive line, always getting to Jared Goff, always suffocating the running game. So when announcer Jim Nantz mentioned on air that Dan seemed more relieved by Clark's departure than concerned about Parsons' arrival, man, I was conflicted because let's be real, Parsons is a monster. The guy signs a 4-year extension, shows up fired up for his debut, and immediately gets a sack on our line. He's not just some average Joe, he's an all-pro, and Packers fans were already celebrating like they'd won a Super Bowl. But the sense you got from Campbell was that he'd rather deal with a new guy coming in, even if he's a top player, than keep going head-to-head with Clark, who knew all our tells. But you know, when you see the Packers run all over us, 27-13, and we start 0-1, you feel that bitterness. And you know what the deal is? The Lions Nation wasn't buying that whole calm speech. In the virtual stands, people were already saying, "What do you mean you're not worried about Parsons?" A real sense of dread set in, because this guy is going to be on that team for years. Imagine this matchup repeating until November when we face them again. It's one of those things. If Parsons gets rolling, our lives get a lot more complicated in this division. Even me, in my fan's heart, I was thinking, come on, Dan, I get the logic. But wasn't this the time to sound the alarm? Because you can't just brush it off after seeing the damage. What's more, the fact that the broadcast brought this up gives the feeling that the coach wanted to instill confidence in the team, but it ended up sounding like carelessness. And then you have that brutal comparison. The Packers made some big moves, gave up picks, traded a veteran, brought in a star, and saw immediate results. Us? We came in with hope, but left the first game getting punched in the mouth and trying to explain what went wrong. It's a tough pill to swallow, but hold on, because it doesn't stop there. This was just the first spark, and the next piece of news deals with the health of the roster, which is another huge concern. Are you ready to hear what happened with our young talent in the secondary? Alright, the next beef is about Terrion Arnold, our young defensive back who, in the middle of the game against Green Bay, ended up tweaking his groin. Man, when I saw him limping, I thought, great, we lost the kid right at the start of the season. But hold on, because according to insider Jeremy Fowler, the injury isn't considered serious. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I'm not gonna lie. My heart was in my throat right there. The kid even tried to play through the pain, showing that warrior spirit. After the game, he said that if he's on the field, there are no excuses. No blaming the groin. No, I couldn't do it because I was injured. That honestly won me over. That kind of mindset is what separates an average player from a game changer. But of course, he also admitted the secondary didn't play well. We had communication breakdowns. The Packers exploited the space. Wide receivers were wide open. You can't deny it. And the fans? Oh man, the fans went ballistic. In the virtual stands, some people were praising Arnold's guts, but they were also calling out the entire unit. If we want to go far, the secondary can't be that soft, one person said. Another was already saying, dude, it's one thing to lose to the Packers, but you can't lose by giving up free routes. And I'm with them because if we want to play in January, our pass defense has to be way more solid. Now, an important detail, Arnold isn't alone in this challenge. DJ Reed came in to replace Carlton Davis, who went to get paid in New England. The expectation was for Reed to bring experience, but in this debut, he fell short too. So, you have a secondary that's still adjusting with a kid trying to lead while being banged up, and just like that, things got complicated. The coaching staff, on the other hand, had already been banking on Arnold's growth. Kelvin Shepard, our defensive coordinator, said last week that he's improved a lot in route reading, anticipation, all that stuff, but in the heat of the game, he still lacks consistency. And it's normal, the guy's only in his second year, but he needs to speed up that process. As Shepard said, it's fine to mess around, but sometimes you gotta lock in and play for real. And to make the list of scares even worse, Daniel Thomas also broke a bone in his hand. But the news is that he's going to get a cast and try to play anyway. Man, this shows how committed the roster is, but also how full the medical department is already right at the start of the season. To be honest with you, I'm conflicted. On one hand, I see Arnold's iron mindset and think, this guy is going to make us proud. On the other, I remember the big plays we gave up and think, if we don't fix this now, the next opponents are going to feast. And the next topic, my friend, is a real gut punch, the fragility of our offensive line and the desperate search for a reinforcement. Now I'm going to talk about a wound that every Lions fan is feeling, the offensive line. Without Frank Ragnow, who retired, the middle of the line has become a hole that's hard to fill. The departure of other pieces only made the interior rotation even more wobbly, and that directly impacts the offense's performance. That's where the name Nick Harris comes in, the former Cleveland Browns player who's a free agent and has recovered from his injury. For many people, this might seem like a secondary signing, but it's not. Harris has that value-for-money profile that fits this front office's philosophy. A player who comes in ready to be a starter at center, but with the flexibility to also hold down the guard position. And those who follow closely, like Dave Burkett and Justin Rogers, have hammered this point home. We need someone who not only holds down the fort technically, but who sets an example, who knows how to read pressure and stay calm when the pocket collapses. And I'll tell you one thing. Without stability in the middle, Goff becomes an easy target. Just remember the game against the Packers, where the interior pressure swallowed up our offense. If that becomes a routine thing, our passing game is going to be reduced to checkdowns and short routes. Easy to predict, easy to stop. Colton Pouncey from The Athletic said exactly that. If we don't fix this now, we'll become predictable. And honestly, predictability is a death sentence in the NFL. Of course, the issue now comes down to money. Harris isn't a guy on a multi-million-dollar contract, but he's not going to play for free either. His market is considered accessible compared to other options, but it depends on how much cap space the Lions want to open up. If you're going to invest, it's better to do it now and not wait for desperation to set in later. Because, once the injuries start and teams notice a weakness, the market price only goes up. In the fan groups, the Lions Nation is already divided. Some say, we have to get the guy now, we can't risk it. Others are still skeptical. Wait, wasn't Harris out with an injury? Is this really going to work out? And I understand the fear. But to be honest, I'd rather take a risk on a recovered Harris than keep improvising with an inexperienced rookie and hoping for a miracle. This is the kind of decision that defines the course of the season. If the team signs Harris, it brings a sense of security, it gives confidence to the locker room. If not, Goff might end up running for his life every snap, and then you can forget about the playoffs. And hold on, because if this line issue is already rattling nerves, the next one is even more explosive. It involves two huge names on the roster and contracts that are shaking up the whole fan base. Now hold on tight because this one really tested the patience of the fan base. The loss to the Packers had already gotten people mad, but the bigger noise came because of the contract negotiations involving two of our most important players, Aiden Hutchinson and Jameson Williams. I'm telling you, my fans' heart was split in a weird way. Starting with the good side, Jameson Williams, who was coming off a historic season, the first time he'd gone over 1,000 yards and scored 8 touchdowns, signed a 3-year, $83 million extension with $67 million guaranteed. In other words, he's locked into that Honolulu Blue jersey for more time, and that, of course, is a good thing. The fans even celebrated because the kid deserves it. And there's always that but. You couldn't really enjoy it knowing that Hutchinson still doesn't have a deal, and that's where the blood started boiling, because let's face it, without Hutch, there's no defense. He's the heart of the pass rush, the guy who puts fear in quarterbacks, the only one who makes opposing offensive linemen lose sleep. So then you ask me, how do the Lions rush to get a deal done with Jameson and leave Hutchinson hanging? It doesn't make any sense, man. The edge rusher market has exploded. Every week that passes, he gets more expensive, and the team is dragging its feet. They're just asking for trouble. The reaction on social media was immediate. Fans saying, we should have paid Hutch before JMO. Others even joking, come to the Giants then. It's that mix of desperation and fear of losing the guy who symbolizes the new face of the defense. And I agree with the fans. This contract should have been signed already, with a party, a press conference, New Jersey, and everything. The worst part is that there's no lack of talk. Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport have confirmed that the negotiations are respectful, even optimistic, but that they won't get a deal done before the season starts. In other words, the saga continues. And every game without Hutch being secured for the future is a pang of anxiety. Imagine if he balls out again and his price doubles. Or worse, if a serious injury happens before he signs. My friend, I don't even want to think about it. The comparison with Williams only increased the pressure. Because on one hand, you lock up an offensive talent who deserves it, but on the other, you leave the foundation of the defense hanging. A real fan feels that in their bones. It feels like the team is playing Russian roulette with the future. To be honest with you, I'm happy for Jameson, but I'm not going to be able to breathe easy until Hutchinson has a new contract. And mark my words, if the front office doesn't resolve this soon, the Lions Nation is going to demand a lot more. And look, after all this, I have to end with a thought that brings these four bombs together and shows the real face of our current situation. I'll tell you, after these four blows, you can feel the heart of the fan base beating fast. First, Dan underestimating Parsons, then Arnold battling with his groin, next the offensive line saga, and finally the serious contract drama. It's all connected, showing that this team is at a serious crossroads. Either they react now or they let the season slip through their fingers. So, comment below, because this is the home of the real Lions Nation, and I want to hear your voice. The next content will be even more fire, you can be sure of that.